This is Amelia and I'll be giving voice to this tutorial by Guadapinos. We're going to create a St. Valentine's illustration. So, think of something really fun. In my case, I've selected a slice of pizza and cheese. Also, don't forget to use a catchy sentence. Let's get started. First of all, arrange the main elements in your composition. In this case, the pizza and the cheese. So I'm going to draw 2 ovals and then 2 triangles inside them, one bigger and one smaller. Guys, let me give you a tip when drawing. Start by inserting simple and basic shapes and then add more complex ones until getting the final result. In this case, both the pizza and the cheese are easy to draw. So, for the pizza, I'll use a sort of curved cylinder and a triangle, and for the cheese, a pyramid. So, we are going to give a detail to each ingredient by using simple shapes, such as circles, triangles, or rectangles. For example, guys, when drawing, using cartoon-like eyes is a really good resource. So this way we'll use simple shapes, but at the same time, exaggerated features. As you can see, the eyes are quite big, and the mouth wide and fun. Also, I added small teeth to make them look funnier. They are cute, right? This arrow indicates the eye's direction. It's important these 2 adorable characters look at each other to establish a connection between them. Now let's add some volume. Specify the volumes in each case. In the case of the pizza, it's essential we add pizza dough in order to add volume. So we need to include the crust. You can use the cartoon style you prefer. It can be a simple cartoon style or a more complex one. Obviously, it's entirely up to you. If you need help developing it, have a look at your favorite artist's works to get inspiration. Well, I think that the illustration will look great if we draw the 2 characters holding hands. The scene now is more romantic, also thanks to the cute hearts I included in there. So guys, this is just the sketch of our characters. However, you can go into detail as much as you like. This way, when inking the sketch, we don't need to introduce any change. Great, so reduce the sketch opacity and create a new layer. In this layer, we are going to sketch the background. Once there, we are going to draw a sort of base for the ground so they don't look like they are floating in the air. Then we are going to draw a sort of banner or something like that, where we are going to add there our text. Well, you can draw it, or you can use one of the default shapes that come with Photoshop. However, it's important to be clear on the style you want to reflect first. For example, if you prefer a classic style, then the geometric shapes are a good option. Another possibility is using the pen tool. In my case, I try to draw the elements manually. To modify the elements on the sketch, select them and press Ctrl-T. This way you can scale them or rearrange them on the canvas until it looks like you want. The composition of your illustration must be appropriate in order to catch the public's attention, so work on it carefully. Great, so the next will be inking our illustration. Work with the same brush used for the sketch. However, this time set the brush opacity to its maximum at 100% and start inking the outline of the drawing. Make sure to keep the same brush width and try to not change its size. Once the outline is drawn, we're going to start working on the elements inside of it. In this case, use a thinner brush to draw elements in groups of shapes. So, for example, draw the eyes with a single shape, the pizza crust with another shape, another one for the above banner, and so on. So, the more details, the thinner the line must be. Okay, so make sure to reduce the brush size for the small details, okay? So you'll find this inking technique of great help when developing cartoonish illustrations. In addition, applying different stroke thickness let the audience distinguish between main and secondary elements. Illustrations containing elements both in the background and foreground. We can also use the stroke variation and apply a thicker stroke to the elements closer to the audience and those in the background with a thinner outline. It's a great technique to add depth to the composition. Well, guys, can you appreciate the visual effect? Some elements are outlined with thicker strokes than others. So those with thicker strokes are closer to the audience or bigger, and the rest with a thinner outline. Can you see it? I really like the result. However, you can opt for another inking technique, for example, using thicker strokes for shadowed areas and thinner for lightened areas. Another possibility is outlining it with the same width. So play around with different inking options and check which one is closer to your own style. Okay, now let's move on to the cheese. These circles represent the cheese holes. You may think that probably using thick strokes are a good idea. However, as you can see, these borders are quite thin. In fact, if you look at a real cheese, you'd see that. So that's why using thin strokes, in this case, is imperative, since it will look much more realistic. When inking our illustration, we also have to pay attention to textures. It's not the same to ink feathers as leather. So it's essential that the outline corresponds to its material, depending on its characteristics. Guys, there is also an alternative to ink your illustration, and it's using a software called AZ Drawing. It's a free software and it's totally compatible with Photoshop. So if you prefer, you can open up your sketch in the software. Once there, you can easily use and work with a lot of different brushes. The result will look amazing, and as I just said, it's quite intuitive and easy to use. As you can appreciate on the screen, I'm drawing the ground or the floor with a much thinner stroke. It's because I want the characters to stand out and they catch our attention straight away. Great, so guys, when your illustration is totally inked, create a new layer under the layer with the inked illustration. Then add a color for the background. You can modify it. So, to do so, press Ctrl U to open the color picker, where you can tweak the parameters such as saturation or hue. What's next? Well, create another layer and put it above this one, which is the background. We'll use this layer to paint the illustrations with flat colors. This time, use a new layer for each colored element. It's important you use a general tone that matches with the illustration theme. For example, I picked an orangey yellow for the pizza. And regarding the cheese, I'll select a more yellowish tone and a light and pale pink for the banner. So all these are just small details that you need to bear in mind in order to get a properly colored composition. The best part is that you can modify the colors easily as we are working in different layers. So after applying the base color, what's next? Well, to apply the rest of colors, we are going to create new layers that will subordinate to their corresponding color base to avoid coloring outside the outline. So, create a clipping mask by selecting the new layer and pressing Alt. So, insert a clipping mask wherever you need. It will allow us to modify the color later. However, it's just a suggestion. If you feel ready to work without layers, go ahead. You can do it with just 1 or 2 layers. If you're working with various layers, it's really important that you name and organize them. Otherwise, you'll go nuts when applying colors. The next step will be inserting the shadows, so we're going to create a shadow layer above each color group. Then, insert a clipping mask in this layer and select a brush slightly more transparent. In my case, I'll use the same brush as for drawing. I picked a purple tone and selected the multiply mode. Now we're going to start adding the color. As you can see, the color changes depending on the color of the layer under it. So we used purple, but it blends with the rest of colors. Can you see it? Once you've finished adding the shadows, reduce the layer's opacity until the shadows merge with the illustration. Also, I think that some gradients will look great on the illustration and they'll enhance the result. So let's do it. Go to the cheese color and select the base color. Make sure you lock the pixels. Then click on the gradient tool, which is next to the paint bucket tool. Make sure you set opacity to 20%. Then pick a suitable color and apply the gradient from top to bottom. By applying a gradient, the result looks way more appealing than just using flat colors. Cool, so once you finish applying all the gradients into illustration, let's add color to the outline. This way, the composition will look greater and more uniform. So select the layer corresponding to the outline and lock it. This time we'll use darker and more saturated tones. In the pizza's case, I'm going to use a darker orange for the crust, a darker red for the pepperoni, a darker green for the pepper, and so on. So play around with different tones to check which one fits in well with the color scheme. Regarding the hearts and the floor, a good idea is using the same base color to draw the line. This way, the line won't be noticeable. There are many different resources and possibilities, so give them a try. So, now we're going to add the text to the banner. So, select the text tool and type in the sentence you chose for your illustration. In my case, I chose, "You add the cheese to my pizza." Remember to select a funny or catchy sentence. So, first, analyze the concept of your illustration. Now, regardless of the font you're using, it's likely you need to modify the size and adjust it to the banner. So the font isn't a big deal since I'll use it as a guide to write the sentence manually. This way the whole illustration will have a cartoon-like effect. However, if you prefer using a digital font, it's okay. In this case, though, make sure it fits in the style you're using for your illustration to avoid this cut and paste ugly effect. So select any brush depending on the effect you are looking for. Write down the sentence in a suitable style for your illustration. In my case, for example, as it's a cartoon-like illustration, I try to reflect this style in my text as well. Okay, so that's why I'm making this sort of sentence, this sort of font. It can be said that this font is similar to the Comic Sans font, although the stroke is straighter. It may be a good idea to practice with different fonts in an empty canvas. Cool. Now it's time to apply the shadows to the banner. So follow the same steps as for the pizza and the cheese. In this case, though, I'll use the eraser tool to smoothen the color a little bit and create a gradient effect. Apart from this, I'll also insert a gradient with the gradient tool. So, you can create a new layer or directly work on the base color layer and insert a gradient. The gradient can be from dark to light or the other way around, up to you. In my case, I'll make a light to dark gradient, so I'll select white and a low opacity. After that, modify your text color by opening the color picker with Ctrl U. Okay, guys, let me expand this color here since the cheese looks like floating. So, to fix it, I'll create a new layer and bring it above the rest. There, I'll carefully expand the color so the cheese looks like it's on the floor. Once your characters and the main elements are finished, we'll modify the background a little bit so the composition looks outstanding. So how are we going to do this? Go to the background layer, and then we are going to create new layers that we are going to put above it. On these layers, we are going to use the gradient tool to create this gradient effect. In my case, I've selected a radial gradient, lighter in the middle and darker in the borders. Then create a new layer and select the brush tool. In this case, make sure the stroke is considerably opaque. Then draw a circle framing the characters. If you use a lighter tone, it'll add more brightness to the scene. Finally, I'll add a sort of frame to the illustration using a brush with a darker pink tone than the original. Guys, try to make it irregularly in order to maintain the cartoonish style. Lastly, it only remains to add our signature to the illustration. Create a new layer and sign it wherever your style is. Make sure it can be appreciated and that it fits in well in the composition. So guys, our Valentine's illustration is ready. It's cute, right? And great, this is the final illustration. And now it's your time. So create your own love illustrations following the style you want. Make sure you select a catchy sentence. And let's get started to spread love everywhere. Also, don't forget to upload your project to Doodpad so we can give you feedback. I really hope that you enjoyed the tutorial and that you learned a lot. See you in the next tutorial. Bye!